Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Wednesday, September 17th, and we got some games to talk about. We have a great Week 4 slate coming up. A couple of teams on byes, but we have three ranked matchups we're going to talk about in the first slate. Obviously, Texas Tech goes on the road to Utah for maybe the play-in game for the Big 12 championship very, very early, but a huge game between the two favorites in that conference. You got Auburn, Oklahoma, two teams that if they win this weekend, they are looking at the CFP as a very real possibility. I think Oklahoma's already doing that a little bit, but Auburn absolutely would get a little bit of a kickstart with a massive win on the road. And then Illinois, Indiana, a huge one in the Big 10 that, again, very well could be the fourth team that makes the CFP from the Big 10, could come from that game, no doubt about it. Going to the second segment, we got Michigan, Nebraska this upcoming weekend. That is another one that absolutely could be the other team that makes it from the Big 12 or the Big 10 into the CFP. There are a lot of really, really good opportunities in that game, and whoever wins it firmly in the mix for maybe making a little bit of a run this year. Tulane Ole Miss, a very interesting game that we'll talk about. We got Florida Miami, South Carolina Missouri in that second segment. Then we'll do a little bit of a whip around to all the other games we want to talk about today. And then my best bets to finish things off. Had a winning record last week, so kind of turning things around there. So hopefully we'll be able to get that going and continue our winning ways into Week 4. But let's go ahead and jump into this thing because we got three games this weekend like we did last weekend. We have one in every single window. Hopefully they'll deliver even close to the level that the ones last week did, because that would be really, really good football. No two ways about it. But we'll start at the noon slate, and then we'll work our way through the day. But it gets started with a bang. We have number 17 Texas Tech going on the road to number 16 Utah. Utah favored by a field goal and a hook in this one. 58.5 is the over-under. This one's going to be really fun. I think a lot of people circle these two teams, including myself, as the favorites in this conference right now, and whoever wins it is firmly the guy that everyone is trying to beat going forward, and firmly the team that I would absolutely pick in the CFP coming out of the Big 12. This is going to be a really, really fun game. Texas Tech comes in as the number 2 scoring offense in the country, obviously has not faced the test that Utah will be this weekend. Utah coming off a game where they didn't play their best football, at least early in that matchup, but found their footing late and won that pretty comfortably. This one's going to be really fun. It's going to be an absolute battle in the trenches, and we'll get to that here in a second, but this is an absolute heavyweight fight in the Big 12. I think these are the two teams that you were absolutely circling coming into the year, and they've held up every end of the bargain thus far. The matchup of to watch in this game is going to be Mac Leftwich against Morgan Scalley. These two guys are about as good as it gets in the Big 12 when you talk about coordinators and play callers. These guys know exactly what they're doing. Obviously, Morgan Scalley has Kyle Whittingham to help him out in different moments, and he absolutely is very hands-on with that defense. Mac Leftwich came in from Texas State this past offseason. Very talented offensive mind, and the guy that really fits with Behren Morton very obviously early on in this season. He's playing great football. It's going to be an awesome matchup. And I think you have two quarterbacks that are very experienced, very smart. Even Devon Dampier, coming in from New Mexico, came in with his offensive coordinator. So it's not like he's going over into a new system. He came in also with his best receiver from New Mexico, and he's the leading receiver for Utah right now. So everything is working the way that Utah wants it to. I think both these sides of the ball are going to have really, really tough times getting a groove at least early in this football game, but Mac Leftwich against Morgan Scalley might just be the one that decides it. You know, can Texas Tech create the explosives they've created through 2 weeks, and can Utah do the exact same thing on the other side, or is this defense just a little bit too much for a Texas Tech team that hasn't quite gotten the big-time test yet? Some keys to watch. The trench battle is going to be absolutely incredible. If you want to see the NFL players on the field, frankly, there's going to be multiple of them all over the field, but the lines of scrimmage are going to be where you want to watch. I think particularly the Texas Tech defensive line against the Utah offensive line. It's going to be special. Utah has two at least first round, maybe top 15 picks at offensive tackle. When you talk about Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu, two incredibly talented guys. And then Texas Tech reworked defensive line looks terrifying. You got Lee Hunter, Romello Heights, Skylar Gill-Howard, and a ton of other guys that are playing really, really good football for that team. And I think they're going to be incredible in this game. I think Utah's offensive line is absolutely incredible. So it's going to be an absolute heavyweight battle up front, and whoever wins it could very well win this game, particularly the Utah offensive line and the Texas Tech defensive line. But the Utah defensive line is nothing and no slouch by any means, and that will be a very fun fight against the Texas Tech offensive line. But the other part of this is which team can create explosives, particularly Texas Tech in some respects. They love to push the ball downfield. They have Coy Egan. They have a number of guys on the outside that can make some big-time plays, and Behren Morton's playing at a ridiculously high level. So Texas Tech, they had 5 30-yard plus passes against Kent State, 3 against Oregon State last week. They're going to push the ball downfield, point-blank period. But Teo Johnson, Jackson Beanie, and a number of other guys on the back end for Utah can make life really, really tough for Coy Egan and company. So I think that's going to be really fun. And then Devon Dampier can make all types of plays. With his arms, with his legs, he is going to make you hurt at some point. How much can you hold up against that group is going to be a huge question for a Texas Tech defense that is going to be really good, especially if that pass rush can get going. Then you have a really interesting conversation, but still the biggest challenge they faced to date by a pretty comfortable margin. Kind of the same thing for Utah, to be totally fair, but at least they get that one at home. And that's kind of my final idea is Rice Eccles is going to be a factor in this game. It is a loud environment. I don't care that it's going to be 10 a.m. They're pretty used to that treatment around that part of the country, so I think they're going to be ready to roll. I think those fans are going to be a factor in this game. Behren Morton, very experienced, very smart, very good football player. This is going to be a really tough atmosphere. There's no doubt about that. Can he handle that, and can the guys around him handle that is about as big of a point in this game as just about anyone else. And I think this one's going to be special. I think it's going to show that these are probably the 2 best teams in the conference. This could very well be a look-ahead spot for the Big 12 championship where we get to see it once and then we get to see it again later in the season. But I'm going to take Utah at home. I'm going to take Utah 31-27. I tend to trust their offense and defense a little bit more as a unit going into this game than I do for Texas Tech. Now, the margins are relatively thin, but Texas Tech continues to enter relatively new guys into the mix, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. I think the Utah offensive line does enough against this really talented front for Texas Tech, and they're able to get a big-time win at home, kind of assert themselves as the top team in the conference, and we'll see how it develops from there. I think these are 2 very, very good football teams. I think they very well could end up meeting in Arlington at the end of the year, but I'll take Utah this time around. Them being at home and having a little bit more trust in that, especially that back end, I'll roll with Utah for the time being. Moving to 3:30 and to the SEC, Auburn goes on the road to Oklahoma, number 22 against number 11. Oklahoma favored by 6.5 points, over under at 48.5. This one's going to be really, really fun. Hugh Freeze against Brent Venables, a very interesting matchup, and really a matchup that, frankly, coming into this game, could have been one where they both really needed it in a lot of different ways. You know, what if Oklahoma loses to Michigan? What if Auburn lost to Baylor earlier in the year? Then you got 2-2-1 teams walking into this game, and they're both thinking, we got to be able to win this one. If they were falling to 500 after this one, I think there would be an awkward conversation to be had about one of these coaches. They're both walking in undefeated, so there's no problem there. They're really rolling right now, and Oklahoma has kind of become the talk of the town in college football, particularly John Mateer taking over the reins, has done a downright incredible job. Probably been one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the SEC thus far, and he wants to continue to assert himself. And then on the other side, it's the guy coming back home. Jackson Arnold takes Auburn into Norman for the first time as not an Oklahoma Sooner. It is going to be a very interesting atmosphere. I don't know exactly how the fans feel about him. Frankly, I don't think they should hate him a ton because there was a lot wrong with that offense that was not named Jackson Arnold, but at the end of the day, it is going to be a very interesting atmosphere, and have to imagine there's going to be some fans that take a little bit of exception for him coming back home, but it'll be really, really fun. I think these are 2 teams that, if they win it, they're probably looking at the CFP as a very real possibility this year. But let's get into the matchup to watch. It's always the matchup to watch whenever Hugh Freeze is going up against a defensive coach. Can Hugh Freeze handle Brent Venables? Can Brent Venables make Hugh Freeze's offense a little bit stagnant? That's the big-time question in this matchup because Jackson Arnold, as good as he's been with his legs, they haven't asked him to do a ton with his arm. And I think that's relatively surprising because you had 2 games where you could kind of play around with things. Now, South Alabama gave you a little bit of a worry late in that football game, but at the end of the day, you probably should have been able to do more in the past game through the first 3 weeks, and now you walk into a game where you're going to need it. I absolutely promise you that. You're not going to run Jackson Arnold 25 times in this game and be able to leave with a win. I can promise you that. So you're going to have to find a way to get a little bit more creative on the outside. Now, the good news for you that Michigan did not have, you have elite wide receivers. You maybe have one of the top 5 or 3 wide receiver groups in the entire country. You got to find a way to get them involved and get them involved relatively early, because I don't think it's going to get easier to get them involved throughout this football game. So it's going to be a really fun matchup between these two. I think they're both really talented in what they do. I'm a little bit more questionable about Hugh Freeze going into this football game, and have been for a while, but at the end of the day, it is going to be a great matchup, and whoever wins it is probably winning this football game. But some keys to the game: Jackson Arnold. Is this a revenge game for him? How does he view this one? I don't really know. I do think the ending over there was tumultuous and not the way that either of them wanted that thing to end. I don't know how much outright bad blood there is. I think everyone was better off going different directions. That doesn't change that he wants to show them something. That doesn't change he wants to show that he was not remotely the problem with that offense a year ago, and he is a very, very good football player still. I tend to believe that. We'll see if he can really put it on a show this upcoming weekend, and can he use his legs to the level that he really wants to, because if he can, he's going to have to make throws that he hasn't had to make this year, and he just didn't make a year ago. So it's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. Does he rise to the challenge? Does he get a little bit intimidated by his former home crowd getting after him just a little bit early in this football game? And then which offensive line can hold up? Both these defensive lines are absolutely nasty, particularly Oklahoma, but when you have Keldrick Falk on a group, you're going to have a really good chance of doing something pretty special any given week. So it is going to be a fight for both these groups. The Auburn offensive line is much more known than the Oklahoma group. They're getting much better. The Oklahoma group is, especially with Michael Fasusi and a lot of those guys coming back and being healthy. That is absolutely huge for this football team, and I think they will get better throughout the year. This is going to be a big challenge. There's no doubt about that. They have dudes across that line for Auburn that are going to play in the NFL someday for quite some time. So how can you hold up against that group? Can you give John Mateer time? They did a great job against Michigan in a number of different ways. Not only the offensive line giving John Mateer a little bit more time, but Ben Arbuckle getting John Mateer out of the pocket, making sure it wasn't as big of a worry for the defensive line to get after him. I think that's probably what they're going to have to do in this game, at least to a certain extent, maybe not to the aggressive extent they had to against Michigan. And then finally, the quarterback run game. I think this is a given. Whenever you watch John Mateer in these big-time football games, he is going to use his legs. Same thing for Jackson Arnold, more by design with Jackson Arnold, but at the end of the day, they're going to need John Mateer in this football game. I think both these teams, if they don't get the quarterback run game going, they're probably not getting the run game going too much. That's been the big kind of thing plaguing both these football teams. Oklahoma maybe, I don't want to say Oklahoma more, but at the end of the day, both these teams are going to need their quarterback to make some big-time plays. Both these defenses are going to play good football. There's no doubt about that. Can Oklahoma find the openings with John Mateer, and do they need to find as many openings as Auburn does with Jackson Arnold's legs? Because that could be the great equalizer as well. Does Auburn need Jackson Arnold's legs a little bit more than Oklahoma does because they can't get the pass game going? Or maybe Oklahoma needs John Mateer to put on a show with his legs. So I think it's going to be a really fun matchup. I think these two teams are really going to get after each other. At the end of the day, whenever I picture this game going, I see Jackson Arnold making one big-time mistake late in this football game, and Oklahoma gets a big-time win. I think Brent Venables is a nightmare to deal with, and I don't think Jackson Arnold in this passing game is ready to do it, at least as of yet. I do think they'll get better throughout the year, but I think this is a big ask for a young quarterback that is still getting comfortable with his wide receivers to go into place and essentially win a football game for you, especially if he can't use his legs to that degree. I'll take Oklahoma to win this one 27-20. I think they look pretty good doing it, if I'm being honest, and the Oklahoma train continues to roll on to a possible CFP berth. Number 9, Illinois on the road at number 19, Indiana. Indiana actually favored by 5.5 in this football game, over under at 52.5. This one's going to be a night game in Bloomington. It's going to be a ton of fun. These two teams, I think if you win this one, you're firmly looking at the CFP as a real possibility. I know Indiana already is kind of expecting that of this season, given what they did last season. Totally understandable. Illinois came into this season as a top 12 team, has stayed there since. So they're firmly in a position where they're already thinking about it. I think they both understand this is the kickstart game. This is the game that really gets you over the hump, that gets you in a position to make a CFP run. And it's two quarterbacks that are really interesting to me. You have Luke Altmaier going into, I believe, his third season up there in Illinois, has played some really good football, played very consistently. And then Fernando Mendoza on the other side that might be one of the more talented quarterbacks in the entire country, a guy that's getting looked at as a future NFL prospect, probably after next year if I had to imagine. But this is going to be a really fun battle, and it's two teams that are really kind of getting their season fully underway. Now, Illinois did play Duke on the road, got a really comfortable, really good win, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a kick up in talent, a kick up in competition. There's no doubt about that. So it's going to be a really fun matchup. I think these two coaches have all the talent in the world, and I think they're two guys that are going to put their team in really good positions. Which team can execute at a higher level is going to be the big question here. And the matchup to watch in my mind is the Illinois wide receivers against the Indiana DBs. I think when you talk about the Illinois wide receivers, I was relatively worried coming in. You lose Pat Bryant from a year ago. You lose Zachary Franklin from a year ago. Hank Beaty's playing really good football right now. Hudson Clement is starting to really play good football, and I do think both those guys has all the ability in the world to be a top receiver in the Big Ten and for Illinois and get them in a position to possibly make the CFP. The problem is you have really good players on the other side of the football. D'Angelo Pons, one of the better cornerbacks you're going to find in the entire country. Lewis Moore playing at a ridiculously high level. Devon Boykin, the same exact thing. Very consistent piece in that back end. It is going to be a really fun battle. Luke Altmaier is going to have to throw into tight windows. He's going to have to make big time plays with his arm because the windows are going to be tight. There's no doubt about that. These receivers are going to be able to get open at times, but D'Angelo Pons is going to be right behind him, and you're going to have to make a good throw. So it's going to be a really, really fun matchup, and I think it's going to go back and forth between which team can just find those small openings. I don't think this game's going to be decided by a ton. I think you're going to have to find the really small openings throughout this one to get a big-time win. Can Luke Altmaier do it? Can Fernando Mendoza do it on the other side? And that's kind of one of my big-time keys to the game. This is Fernando Mendoza's big-time test. This is his first big-time test as the Indiana quarterback, and it's a lot. There's no doubt about that. You're playing a night game in Bloomington against a top 10 team. It is going to be a lot of pressure on him, and the Illinois defense really proved themselves against Duke. It wasn't a perfect game throughout a lot of that, but the defense got after him. Gabe Jacobs is an absolute nightmare to deal with. They have a number of really good players on the back end of that defense that can make play after play, and he's going to have to be careful. He's going to have to play really consistent, really clean football and not give Illinois the openings to kind of run away with this one the way that they were able to against Duke. And then the run game battle is really interesting to me. Both these teams want to run the ball. That is who they are. Indiana has 3 different leading rushers through the first 3 games, all of which have over 200 yards on the season. Fernando Mendoza is a factor with his legs as well. Then you got Illinois. Caden Fagan, very talented guy. Khalil Valentine, another really good player. Aiden Malafry. It's a very, very good group on both sides of the football when you talk about the run game. And if either of these quarterbacks don't get a run game to help them out, it's probably going to be a tough day sledding. There's no doubt about that. It's probably going to be a really, really long afternoon, and you're going to have to find a way to scrape by points. They're going to have to get the run game going early in this one. Whichever team can do that more effectively is in a really good position moving forward. Obviously, Indiana's been able to run the ball very effectively against lesser talent. Illinois has been able to run the ball fairly effectively against Duke and a couple of relative layups. So whichever one of these teams can get that going early is probably going to win this football game. And then, as we talked off the top, this is a CFP kickstart. This is a game that can get you in a position to make a run towards a CFP. For Illinois, you still get USC, Washington, and Ohio State later, so you still have work to do. For Indiana, it's Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State. But the reality is, you get to 10-2, you're in a really good position going forward. They would be 4-0 if one of them, whichever one wins this game, and they'd be in really good position, particularly Illinois only getting Ohio State while Indiana gets Oregon and Penn State. But at the end of the day, both these teams are in firm position to make a little bit of a run. Indiana gets a big one against Iowa next week, so it's going to be really, really interesting to watch all of that unfold, and it's going to be awesome to watch what these two teams can do. I'm going to pick Indiana to win it. I don't really have a great reason. I think these two teams are relatively even in my mind. I think Fernando Mendoza has a little bit of a coming out party. I think he makes one big-time play or a couple big-time plays in this football game and kind of takes the world by storm just a little bit. We'll have to see what Indiana does the rest of the season, but I'll take the Hoosiers to get a big-time win at home. One of the bigger wins under Curt Cignetti. Obviously, the Michigan win last year was huge, but this might be a little bit bigger than that one. A huge one at home at night in Bloomington. I'll take the Hoosiers to win this football game. But those 3 games are going to be incredible. We can only hope they deliver the way Clemson, Georgia Tech, Georgia, Tennessee, and then Texas A&M, Notre Dame did last week. We'll just have to wait for those. They're going to be incredible matchups, and we will absolutely talk about them a little bit more on Friday and then break them down on Monday when they unfold. But let's take a little bit of a break. When we come back, we got a Week 3 picks. We got Michigan, Nebraska, Tulane, Ole Miss. We got Florida, Miami, South Carolina, Missouri, all coming right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the big three matchups of this upcoming weekend. Texas Tech, Utah. I'm going to take the home team Utah there. Auburn, Oklahoma. Again, going to take the home team Oklahoma. And then Indiana, I think, is going to win at home over Illinois. I'm leaning a little bit towards the home teams around this time of year. And we got four more for you right here. We got Michigan, Nebraska. We got Tulane, Ole Miss, Florida, Miami, as well as South Carolina and Missouri coming up this weekend. All of which are games that could have CFP implications, and we'll start with a huge one in the Big Ten. It is a game that absolutely could have the same implications we just talked about with Illinois, Indiana. Both these teams could firmly be looking the CFP in the face if they were able to win tomorrow or on Saturday. Michigan on the road at Nebraska. Michigan favored by 2.5 points, over under at 45.5. This one's going to be incredible. Dylan Raiola gets a huge chance. Nebraska gets a huge chance to show people this is a little bit different of a year. Show people that they can make a run at the CFP. For Michigan, you want to get back on track. You played a great game last week against Central Michigan. Obviously, losing that one to Oklahoma was very tough, but this would be a great bounce-back win and would still put you in a great position moving forward. Some tough games after this, no doubt about it, but they would be in a position to possibly make an interesting run at something pretty special in the Big Ten this year. But the matchup to watch to me is Dylan Raiola against Wink Martindale. We know Wink Martindale is an NFL guy. He's going to bring some different concepts that Dylan Raiola hasn't confidently seen before, but at the end of the day, this is a very good quarterback. This is a guy that if you give him time and give him time to see the field, he's going to go through his reads very professionally. He's going to get the ball out efficiently, and he's going to put it on target 9 times out of 10. He's a very, very confident football player, and I think he's going to be a guy that really rises to the challenge, not only in this game, but going forward the rest of the season. But that being said, Wink Martindale can always bring something a little bit different to the table, and if that offensive line or those receivers can't hold up the way that they need to, maybe things crumble just a little bit for this Nebraska offense. Some keys to the game. Michigan's quarterback run game is a must in this football game. I think you saw it last week with Bryce Underwood. That's a special athlete. Went for over 100 rushing yards in the game against Central Michigan. Was not used against Oklahoma, which bears the question. How much do you want to use him in these big games where he's going to get hit pretty good whenever he leaves the pocket? Nebraska is going to know that that's a very talented quarterback, not necessarily wanting to injure him by any respect, but wanting to let him know you're there. There's no doubt about that. That is going to happen at some point in this football game. Doesn't change that you're probably going to have to use his legs at some point, going to have to use the entire playbook to really open this thing up. I tend to believe they will. How much is probably the big-time question here. The Nebraska pass protection. They've gone through a lot of different iterations of this offensive line, particularly at right tackle more than anything else. Gunnar Gotola, Turner Corcoran, Elijah Pritchett that came over from Alabama was probably expected to be the outright starter. Kind of been a little bit all over the place. It sounds like it's going to be Gunnar Gotola's spot going forward, but Jayshon Barham, Cole Sullivan, some very, very talented guys on the other side of the ball that you're going to have to deal with every single snap. If they can't hold up, I could see things falling apart relatively quickly for this Nebraska offense. They got to be able to hold up at least enough to give Dylan Raiola time to go about his business. He's going to do it efficiently and well. You just got to give him a moment to really be able to see the field, especially early in this football game. And then this is Nebraska's moment in a number of different ways. This is the moment where you hire Matt Rule. You're into year 3 at this point. You have a lot of things rolling in the right direction. You got to get this one. You've fallen short in these big-time games in the past, and really a lot of games in the past, to be totally fair, but you have a moment here to beat a Michigan team that everyone's going to be watching, a ranked team at home. It is going to be a huge moment for this football program. Can they get it done is the big-time question. I think they will. I'm going to pick Nebraska to win this football game 21-17. I think Dylan Raiola has the ability to go about his business very effectively in this game against a good Michigan defense, and I think Bryce Underwood's a good football player. I still think this might be a little bit too much for him early in his career. I don't know if they're going to use the quarterback run game the way that I tend to believe they should, so I'm going to go with Nebraska in this game. I think they do enough. I don't know how pretty it is, but I think there's a lot of excitement about Matt Rule moving forward. Tulane on the road at number 13, Ole Miss. Ole Miss favored by 11.5 in this game. Over-under set at 61.5. This one's really fun, and it's a Tulane team that comes in, not necessarily the number one team in the CFP when you talk about group of 6, but definitely number 2 if they're not number 1. I think South Florida kind of took that number 1 spot for a little bit, but this Tulane team wins on the road at Ole Miss. They take it right back. I can absolutely promise you that, and set up a very interesting American season throughout the entire year, because that's a very fun conference with a lot of really interesting teams, one of which we'll talk about later in the show. But this is a really, really fun game. Jake Retzlaff comes in and makes all types of plays with his legs. Totally changes the dynamic of that Tulane offense, and it's been really, really fun to watch. Ole Miss going through an interesting quarterback situation that we'll talk about here in a second. It sounds like it's going to be Trinidad Chambliss. Does that help out Tulane just a little bit? But the matchup to watch is going to be the Tulane run game against the Ole Miss front seven. Tulane wants to run the football. They run it about 58% of the time, about 40 times per game. So they are going to keep the ball on the ground one way or the other with Jake Retzlaff, with a lot of the running backs that they have at their disposal. Ole Miss has a front seven that they have not seen. It is an absolute nightmare to deal with. They have athleticism that they have not seen this year, even with the Duke team, especially with the Northwestern team, with all due respect. This is a nightmare of a group up front. It is going to be really, really tough. Jake Retzlaff is going to have to find a way to get his run game going. Have to find a way, if it's just him, to get out of the pocket and make some plays with his legs, because this group will get after you, and if you're not prepared for it, they're going to take you down very quickly, and you're not going to have a shot in this football game. The keys to the game, I'm looking at this more of a perspective of how can Tulane win this game, because I think we all understand Ole Miss is the comfortable favorite in this football game and probably should win. But the Ole Miss quarterback situation, it's an opening. There's no doubt about that. Arkansas had very little idea that it was going to be Trinidad Chambliss in that football game. Tulane at least knows. And when you have John Summerall, you have a shot to put together a very good defensive performance regardless of who you're playing. This is an opening. There's no doubt about that. Trinidad Chambliss played really good football last week. If you can shut down his leg, you might have a little bit of an opening in this football game. And that's going to be a lot easier said than done. So we'll see how that kind of develops. We'll see if Tulane can kind of rise to that challenge. I don't think it's going to be Austin Simmons. There's a world where he gets healthy, but I think it's going to be Trinidad Chambliss, and at the very least, Tulane knows that going in. Tulane's run defense is the other part of this. We talked about Trinidad Chambliss's legs. You're going to have to make plays with that. But Kewan Lacey, if you can slow him down, this Ole Miss offense will slow down at the very least. I don't think though it'll grind to an absolute stop, but we saw it against Kentucky. Kewan Lacey was able to get going later in that football game, but early on it was a little bit tough sledding, and the offense kind of went by the wayside. Austin Simmons missed some big-time throws. There was a couple of turnovers, and you're looking at that game, and Kentucky's firmly in the mix late in that football game. So I think you're in a position where if Tulane can stop the run, if they can keep Kewan Lacey, particularly early in this football game, away from getting those 7, 8, 10-yard runs that really put a damage to you, I think they have an opening here. And then play clean football. If Tulane cannot turn the ball over, they're in really good shape because they force a lot of turnovers. They force 2.7 turnovers per game through 3 games this season. They're 7th in the country when you talk about turnover margin. They're playing really good football. And I think it's a position where you have a quarterback in Trinidad Chambliss that has a lot of confidence, but we haven't really seen thrown all the way into the fire yet. We'll see what happens in this football game. Obviously, the Arkansas game was plenty tough. I think he's going to play good football in this game, but maybe Tulane can make things a little bit more nerve-wracking for him. Maybe he starts down just a little bit more aggressively than the Arkansas game. But at the end of the day, I'm going to pick Ole Miss. I tried to do my best to talk myself into Tulane in this spot. I think going on the road against a much more physically and athletically imposing team is going to be a lot. I'll take Ole Miss to win this one 30-20, but I think it's going to be a fun football game. I think Jake Retzlaff is going to do enough with his legs to make this thing interesting, but I'll take Ole Miss to win this one relatively comfortably at the end of the day. Florida goes on the road to Miami this week, and I don't know what to make of it. Miami's favored by a touchdown and a half, or 7.5 points, excuse me. Over-under at 51.5. This one's going to be a night game down there in Miami, which has become a little bit of an atmosphere over the last little bit. So this is going to be a really fun football game. I think you have a Florida team that is limping in. I don't think there's any other way to put it. They're coming in with a coach that very well could not be their coach on Monday if things go poorly in this football game. There's a lot on the table in this game. Miami has a chance to really kind of continue to assert themselves as one of the top teams in the country, continue to assert themselves as the very best team in the ACC right now. It's going to be a little bit tougher of a battle than I think some people expect, but at the end of the day, you're walking into a moment where you can really just kind of put a beating on Florida and really put them away for just about the entirety of the season. I think Miami wants to do that. But the matchup to watch in this game, the Florida D-line against the Miami O-line, Caleb Banks isn't playing, and that really hurts what this Florida defensive line is going to be able to do. That being said, they still have very talented guys, very physical guys up front that can make big-time plays. The issue is the Miami offensive line is downright terrifying. They are a beast of a group, and they have two guys on both sides of that offensive line, Inez Cooper as well as Francis Mauanoa, that are going to be first-round picks. They're absolute nightmares to deal with. They are such good players. Markel Bell on the other side of the offensive line is a freak of nature as well. It's going to be really hard for Florida to get the push that they want to get in this game. Florida's given up 115 yards per game on the ground. I think it might be a little bit more aggressive in this football game, but some keys to watch. Jaden Baugh, as simple as that. He is the best football player that is going to be on the field in a Florida uniform this weekend because Caleb Banks is out in some respects. But at the end of the day, this is a uniquely talented football player. Give him the ball. I get it. Miami's run defense is very good. They're one of the best in the country. That is going to be a fight you're going to have to win. The reality of the matter is your quarterback's not your quarterback right now. DJ Lagway is not playing his level of football the way that he is capable of playing it. You got to take the ball out of his hands. You got to give him a run game that can really help him out. Jaden Baugh can make plays for you, even against a front that is going to be nasty, that is going to make big-time plays with Ruben Bain, with all those Akeem Mesidor and all those guys up front that they have. At the end of the day, it's a whole lot better than a quarterback that had 5 picks last week going up against Ruben Bain and a nightmare of a pass rush for Miami. Hand the ball off early and often in this football game. If you want to stay in realm of winning this game, you're going to need plays from DJ Lagway. I promise you that down the stretch of this football game, but early in it, especially early in it, get the ball to Jaden Baugh and let him do what he does. He's going to get you positive yards, and he's going to give you a shot. The other part of this, the QB mistake gap. There's going to be a gap in this game. I have to feel that going into it. DJ Lagway has played really poor football, including 5 INTs last week to LSU. Carson Beck has thrown 2 all year, both coming last week, but had not thrown any, and I believe the 6 games before that, going back to his time at Georgia. He's a very good football player. If you give him time to process the field, he is going to tear you apart. There's really no other way that's going to go. So you're in a position where, can DJ Lagway avoid mistakes enough? I think he's going to make mistakes in this football game. I think the defense on the other side is too good. Can he avoid them enough? Can you force Carson Beck into enough where at least you're not playing at a massive deficit? At least you're not putting yourself in a position where you're down 10 points to an LSU team, but you have a quarterback with 5 picks, and that's the reason you're down by this much. That's the reason you're even down in the first place. You have the ability to shorten the gap in this football game if you can avoid mistakes from DJ Lagway. It's not all the way in Billy Napier's control, but it's enough in Billy Napier's control to make this happen. And then that's the big key. The Napier question is a very real thing. Every Florida player understands what's happening behind the scenes. Billy Napier understands what's happening. If he doesn't win this football game, if he at least doesn't keep it close in this football game, he's probably looking for a new job here pretty soon. And you hate to talk about it, it's the reality of the situation. The players understand that. Billy Napier understands that. How do they handle the pressure? On the road, at a very tough environment against one of the very best teams in the country, can they rise to the occasion? Can they play better football than they've played through 3 weeks? I tend to think no. I think the reality of this football game is you're going to see Miami score 1 or 2 touchdowns early in this game, and you're just not going to see Florida respond all that well. I think it's a good football team filled with talented players that have the ability to turn a corner, maybe in this game or maybe throughout the year. I just think they're in a really bad spot. I talked about it last week. I thought they were holding on by a thread going into LSU, and they were walking into a buzzsaw at night against in Baton Rouge. I think the exact same things happen in this football game. I think they're in a really bad spot, and I think they're walking into a football team that is just going to execute at way too high of a level. I'll take Miami to win it 34-17. I think Billy Napier is fired on Sunday. I hate to say it. I think it's the reality of that situation, and we'll see how it develops from there for Florida. South Carolina on the road at number 23, Missouri. Missouri favored by 10.5 in this football game. We'll talk about why here in a second, but over-under at 47.5, 7 p.m. kick. It is going to be a really fun one. Missouri kind of needs it in some respects. You look forward at the rest of their schedule, very manageable. They have Alabama on the road. They have Oklahoma later in the year. They have some tough games, no doubt about it. You win this one, you're probably not going to lose more than 2 games. Now, obviously, you very well could. You could play some different football the rest of the way, but they're playing really high-level football, particularly on offense, and I think they can really do some special stuff. Lenore Sellers, that's the big time question going into this game. It doesn't sound like he's going to play. Shane Beamer was very cagey about that, said we have a policy that if you don't practice Tuesday and Wednesday, you're probably not going to play in the football game. I don't know if that meant Lenoris didn't practice yesterday and didn't practice today. We'll find out. We'll see how that develops throughout this week. I tend to believe he's going to play. I also tend to believe he's not going to be 100%, and we'll talk about that a little in a second here. But the matchup to watch to me is the Missouri offensive line against the South Carolina pass rush. The real only, or I don't want to say the only way, but one way it goes wrong for Missouri in this football game is Beau Paribla meets Dylan Stewart and Brian Thomas Jr. just a little bit too early in this football game, and all the confidence he had, all the stuff he had rolling into this football game just starts to kind of slowly break down. Now, I think South Carolina has a little bit of work to do defensively as well, but at the end of the day, if those two guys can have the impact that they're capable of having against an offensive line that's played really good football thus far, but does have some new guys, does have some new faces that they're still kind of working into up to speed, I should say. But at the end of the day, this could crumble a little bit for Missouri. It also could be something where the offensive line plays really well. Beau Paribla puts on a show, and he's the number one Heisman contender on Sunday morning. So it's going to be a really fun matchup. I think the way that South Carolina has to win this football game is the defense playing really good football, Missouri's offense feeling a little bit unconfident going into the second half, and then hopefully getting one big-time play from your offense. But the keys to the game, we just talked about it. Lenore Sellers' health is a massive piece. I think he's going to play. I don't think he'll be 100%, and that's the big-time question here is how good is the South Carolina offense with an 80% Lenore Sellers, with a 70% Lenore Sellers, because I think we understand that that's one of the very most important players in the entire country, regardless of team, regardless of position, because he creates a lot for that offense. Now, hasn't played his best football through a couple of weeks of the season, but at the end of the day, they're a whole lot better of a football team with him on the field than with him off of it, so he's going to have to be in that football game. How close to 100% he is might just decide what the South Carolina offense can do on Saturday. And then Missouri, if they can get the run game going outside, they're going to do a lot of really, really special things. Dylan Stewart, one of the most special pass rushers in the entire country. Maybe the run defense leaves a little bit to be desired, and that's an opening where Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts can really get going on those outside zone, wide zone type reads and just tear off for 60 yards. That's what they did against Kansas. That's what they've done against just about every team they've played thus far, and this is an opening for them to really put that on tape and kind of show everyone they're a very real football team that not only needs to beat you with flash, but has two running backs that will absolutely bury you any chance they get. And then explosive plays on both sides of the football, but mainly for South Carolina because they're going to need quite a few of them. Their offense has not been a consistent group through 3 weeks of the season. They've only been able to hit massive plays or go 3 and out, really, for the vast majority of it, and you're going to have to find a way to get those guys going early in this football game, because if you can't, you're going to have a really, really tough time getting this win. I'm going to take Missouri to win this one. I think they win this one 31-21. I think they have enough offensively. I think they get the run game going with those two incredible running backs. I think Beau Paribla hurts them with his legs just a little bit, and South Carolina looks up at the end of this game, and they're 2-2 with a lot of big-time questions, probably including Lenore Sellers' health moving forward. So it's going to be a really fun game. I think it has a ton to do with what the SEC is going to look like going forward. If Missouri wins it, they very well could be a playoff team. If South Carolina wins it, then maybe they're back in the mix and Lenore Sellers can make some big-time plays. But we'll talk about all of those on Friday. We'll get into a little bit more details as we get into the end of it. But let's get into the final games I want to talk about this week. We have Arkansas at Memphis, SMU, TCU, Oregon State, Oregon, and a number of others right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some big-time games all around the place. Florida has a big-time one that they don't win it. They're probably looking for a new coach here pretty soon. But a lot of things we'll talk about on Friday, and we'll get into the weekend then. But Week 3 whip around, we have a number of games I want to just touch on here pretty quickly as we get towards the end of this show. But let's go ahead and jump into this. And we'll start with a big-time game that is going to go on in Memphis this upcoming weekend. Arkansas goes on the road at Memphis, favored by a touchdown and a hook here, over under at 62.5, a noon kickoff. this one's going to be really fun. There's no two ways about that. I think Arkansas, coming off a really tough loss to Ole Miss, heading into a very tough group of 16 when you talk about Memphis. This is a very talented team. Brendan Lewis comes in from Nevada at quarterback. A tough defense on the other side, only gave up 7 points a week ago to Troy. They're in a position where they can make a massive, massive win here and possibly put themselves in the CFP conversation along with Tulane, along with USF, and that would be a very fun American, no doubt about that. That would be a very fun conference down the stretch. Arkansas needs to win this one really badly. This is a nightmare of a schedule they got coming up, starting with Notre Dame, then SEC schedule that is really, really tough in a number of different ways. They probably need this one if they want to make a bowl game. At least in my eyes, I think they have a lot of tough games coming up, and I think they'll be able to get this one. I'm going to lean towards Arkansas in this football game. I see Memphis making it really, really close and making it a little bit uncomfortable for Arkansas, but I'll take Taylor Green to make one more play than Memphis does, and I'll say Arkansas wins this one at least by a little bit. Syracuse at Clemson. Clemson favored by 17.5 in this football game, so a lot of people will be on Syracuse. 55.5 to the over-under. Clemson got to try to regroup. Their coach is losing his mind at press conferences right now. He is kind of crashing out just a little bit. I understand part of it. I don't understand a lot of it. I think he's in a position where I think he's letting a couple of maybe Twitter, Instagram comments get to him just a little bit too much. He is not being fired. Nothing is going wrong as of right now. Well, things are going wrong, to be totally fair. But at the end of the day, he's not getting fired anytime soon. It could get pretty toxic pretty quickly if you lose this football game. I can promise you that. Syracuse has not played great this season. Now, last week, they were able to roll over Colgate, so that's enough. But at the end of the day, they win this one. A lot of things change very quickly, including the way people talk about Clemson, not only this year, but moving forward the rest of the next couple of years. If I'm being totally honest, this is a very, very interesting game. Now, I think Clemson's going to win. I think they're going to be able to win this football game. I can't say confidently how they're going to do it because at the end of the day, I can't say much confidently about this football team right now, but I'll take Clemson to win this game. I'll take them to get a big-time win that they badly need right now. SMU at TCU, the battle for the DFW, a very, very fun game. TCU favored by 6.5, over-under at 64.5. This one's going to be really fun. TCU was able to beat up on UNC and Abilene Christian before they had a bye, I believe last week, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the week before Abilene Christian. But at the end of the day, SMU needs a big-time win. They will go 2-2 heading into the ACC, and they have a much tougher ACC schedule than they had last year, so they got a lot of stuff to figure out if they lose this football game. But they give up 440 in the air to Sawyer Robertson with two overtimes to be totally fair, but makes me really nervous about their ability to stop Josh Hoover in this TCU passing offense. So I think it's going to be a really fun game. I think they're going to go back and forth, but I like the TCU defense to make enough plays in this football game for Josh Hoover to be a special player in this football game the same way Sawyer Robertson was in week 2, and SMU falls. TCU gets a big-time win at home. Oregon State at Oregon. This one's going to be rough. This is going to be another layup on the way for Oregon to go to Penn State next week and, again, in a whiteout game, hopefully get a big-time win. This should be another one where you work out the kinks. Now, I really think they should lean on the run in this football game, take a little bit more off Dante's shoulders the way they did last week. Loved Ayer Hill. He makes play after play, a very, very electric player, and definitely a guy that should have openings in this football game, quite a few of them, frankly. So, Oregon, if they're going to be able to beat Penn State, I think they're going to need that run game quite a bit, at least next week. I think they're probably going to get it kind of broken in this week, at least more than they already have. They've done a great job throughout the early parts of the season. I think they win this one. I think they win it pretty comfortably, and they move forward with a lot of confidence going into a massive one in State College. Purdue on the road at number 24 Notre Dame. Notre Dame needs this one. I think we all understand that. They're 0-2 for the first time in quite some time. They obviously lose to pretty quality teams, two teams that could be in the playoff at the end of the year, but still a lot of things to figure out. No doubt about that, particularly with that defense. He should have an opening to figure some things out against Purdue, to be totally fair, but Purdue did put up a fight against USC just a little bit at the very least, but if Notre Dame can play clean football, I think they're going to be in really good shape. I think Notre Dame rolls in this football game. I think they get Jeremiah Love going, and they're at least have a little bit more confidence going into week 5 and beyond. This is still a good football team. They ran into two very good football teams. We'll have to see how this thing develops. Still a lot of time left for Notre Dame. North Carolina at UCF, very fun game, and a game that it looks like Bill Belichick is just calling them Central going forward, which fair enough. Do your thing. But Bill Belichick looking for a second chance to get a solid non-con win this year. Obviously missed out on a big chance against TCU at home, but you go on the road to a UCF team that you can beat at the end of the day. You have the ability to get this one. UCF eked out a win over Jackson State in week 1, dominated in North Carolina A&T, but this offense could get going. Taven Jackson's starting to get a groove. They're kind of running a 2-quarterback system. Ja'Cory Brown more of the runner, very talented runner. Jaden Nixon, the running back that came over from Western Michigan. They have a lot of juice in that backfield for UCF. For North Carolina, they got to get Gio Lopez going in this football game, and if you shut down the UCF run, you can do a lot of really special stuff. I tend to believe they won't. I think UCF wins this football game. I think Jaden Nixon runs all types of wild, and they're able to get a big-time win heading into their Big 12 slate. For North Carolina, they're probably trying to figure out a way they can go bowling after this football game. West Virginia at Kansas this upcoming weekend. Kansas favored by 13.5, over-under at 56.5. West Virginia coming off a really tough-fought win in overtime against Pitt. Kansas coming off a bye against Missouri that Jalen Daniels really playing confident football. Obviously lost that game to Missouri, but played pretty good football throughout that game, and he's absolutely a guy that if you have on the football field, you're going to have a good chance to win a lot of games this year. And West Virginia, we saw it throughout the early parts of the season. They want to run the football. Ty Edwards showed that last week with a great performance against Pitt. Kansas has given up 149 on the ground per game, so there's a moment here for West Virginia to find some openings early on, maybe get this game a little bit more on their pace rather than Kansas, which might be a little bit more frantic and up. And now West Virginia loves to play up pace, so it might just be a track meet both ways. But I do think Kansas is going to win this game. I think they have more reliable quarterback play. They have a quarterback that I know is going to be out there for the full game in Jalen Daniels, as long as he's fully healthy through the full game. But at the end of the day, I think Kansas gets a big-time win. I think they move into a position where probably aren't the top team in the Big 12, but firmly in that second tier that could make a run at the title. Michigan State at number 25, USC. USC favored by 17.5 in this game, over-under at 56.5. It's an 11 p.m. kick, so this is going to test a little bit of my strength on Saturday. But at the end of the day, Michigan State heads to L.A. They want a massive win. Under Jonathan Smith, they haven't gotten that big win yet. Aiden Childs has kind of flirted with big wins, has flirted with big moments, and then has kind of fallen short. They have the ability to do something pretty special in this game. Now, Jade Mayav on the other side, he wants to push the ball downfield. That's what USC does, and if they can slow that down, maybe you have a little bit of an opening in this game. But USC, like last week, they should be able to roll here. They should be able to get right, do a lot of really nice things, and continue to move forward with a very interesting campaign they're putting together. But I don't know. I think Aiden Childs has enough up his sleeves to make this thing close. I do think USC wins this football game. I think it's a close one down the stretch. I think USC coming back from being on the road, although it was at Purdue, a lot of travel involved in that. I think the offense is a lot more volatile than it has been the first couple of weeks, and I think Jonathan Smith does enough to keep this team in the game. I think Aiden Childs makes a couple of plays. I think they win the football game, but I don't think you feel super confident about USC going into a stretch where it's Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, Nebraska. I can't say you're going to feel great about that team going into it. I do think they get a win, but I think Aiden Childs shows some people that he's a pretty special athlete on Saturday night. But a lot of really fun games this week. You know, there's the big-time ones, the 3 ranked matchups, the ones that are going to define the CFP race, and then there's some really interesting one. That Arkansas-Memphis game could end up being the game of the weekend. Very, very fun one over there in Memphis, and one that the Tigers win it. They are firmly in the mix right there with South Florida and Tulane for that G5 spot, and they're all in the same conference. And we'll talk about it all right after this. We'll get into my best bets. A number of games that we have already talked about, a couple of games that we haven't gotten into that we'll all talk about right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about some different games from this upcoming weekend. We got Arkansas on the road, a little bit of an upset special in Memphis, Tennessee this upcoming weekend, and then the battle for DFW, SMU against TCU, a very fun one over there in Fort Worth this weekend. But let's go ahead and get into my best bets. A number of games that I feel weirdly confident about. It probably means that things aren't going to go perfectly this weekend, but at the end of the day, there is a number of games that I feel pretty good about going into this weekend, and we'll start with Memphis. We just talked about it in the last segment. I think Memphis keeps this one close. Plus 7.5 is what I'm going here against Arkansas. I think Brendan Lewis is a really fun football player. And I think what you saw last week with Trinidad Chambliss being able to find openings with his legs, you're probably going to find the same exact thing with Brendan Lewis. Now, obviously, I think Arkansas will play better football on the defensive side of the ball than they did last week. But at the end of the day, that's a very athletic, very electric quarterback that can really make you hurt if you give him openings to make some plays with his legs. The other part is Arkansas is mistake prone. It's not to say that they're going to make a ton of mistakes in this football game, but down the stretch against Ole Miss, they left a little bit on the table. They left maybe the win on the table with a late fumble in that game. I think they're going to give Memphis enough chances in this game to keep it close. I think they'll keep it within 7.5. I think Arkansas will barely win this game, but I think Memphis will keep it close and really put a lot of people on notice about the Tigers. UNLV minus 2.5 over Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio has a real problem stopping the run, particularly from quarterbacks. Throughout this season, they have really struggled to keep guys in the pocket and keep guys from making big plays with their legs. If that's the case, then Anthony Colandre is going to run all over them and make play after play. He's a very talented runner of the football. UNLV is kind of finding it, especially defensively. Offensively, they were kind of rolling from week one. Now, Jaden Thomas had to a little bit save them early on in the season, but at the end of the day, they're rolling offensively. They're starting to find it defensively. I think they're going to be an opportunistic group, not necessarily an elite one down after down, but guys like Denver Harris will make plays. Guys like Amarius Thomas, I believe, is going to make big-time plays, and I think they're going to do enough to win a lot of football games this year, including this one. I think they'll be able to win this one by at least a field goal, make a couple of plays on the defensive side of the ball, and then Anthony Colandre and Jaden Thomas just run absolute wild on this Miami of Ohio defense. TCU minus 6.5 over SMU. I don't love this SMU team. I think they're good. I think they have the ability to make some big-time plays this year, kind of win some games in the SEC, or ACC, maybe make some big-time upsets. But at the end of the day, I can't fully trust this team right now. I think the defense is a lot of bit questionable in a number of different areas. I think Kevin Jennings is going to play good football. I think there's also going to be a little bit of mistakes in there, and I think losing Brashard Smith was a huge loss for this offense. I think TCU is going to be able to make plays, particularly with his arm in this football game. I think it's going to look not like the UNC game necessarily, but I think they're going to be able to do a lot of things offensively like they were able to do in the UNC game and at least be able to pull away from this team late. I don't think it's necessarily going to be perfect. I think SMU is going to be able to score quite a bit in this football game, but I think TCU is able to win this one by at least 7, maybe able to stretch it to 10 or 14. North Texas minus 2.5 over Army. If you aren't watching Drew Mestemaker in this North Texas offense, you're probably missing out. This is a very special group, no doubt about it, and they're going to be able to put up a fight in the American with Memphis and South Florida and Tulane. It is going to be a really fun conference in a number of ways. This is a huge game for them in that conference, and Army was able to get the massive win over Kansas State in week 2. A lot of people started to kind of buy back into Army after losing to Tarleton State in week 1, but at the end of the day, I think North Texas is going to be able to throw the ball around a lot in this football game. I think they have a very potent offense, and while I think Army is very good, I think North Texas is going to do enough to stop that run game and be able to at least pull away a little bit in this one, win this game by 3 or more. I think that North Texas offense is going to be one of the more fun units to watch the entirety of the year in the entirety of the country. Tulane plus 11.5 versus Ole Miss. This is a little bit of a heart pick, I'll be totally honest. I love this Tulane team. I love John Sumrall. I think they put together something really special over there. Love bringing in Jake Retzlaff late and being able to put it all together. Very tough thing to do, but he's been really special, especially with his legs. I think Tulane has the ability to sort of sneak up on Ole Miss here, weirdly enough. You know, Tulane's a very good G5 team. Ole Miss understands that. They're definitely not letting Tulane totally sneak up on them, but they're coming off a really hard-fought game against Arkansas where they had quarterback drama. They have a game next week against LSU at home. This is right that moment where Tulane can at least sneak up on them enough, maybe make this a 7 or 3-point game late in it. I do think Ole Miss is able to win this game, but I think it's going to be really close. I think Tulane might jump out to an early lead, maybe hold a lead at halftime, and everyone starts watching, everyone locks in, and then Ole Miss is able to kind of pull away late. But I do think this is a game where you're catching Ole Miss at kind of the right time. You had a really emotional game last week that you barely snuck away with. You have an LSU team coming to town that if you beat them, you're firmly in the CFP mix. But I think Tulane can do enough to at least keep this game close, maybe even end up winning it. But I'll pick Ole Miss to win and Tulane to cover. Washington minus 20.5 over Washington State. I'll put this nicely. Washington State is poopy. They're not good at football. They lost to North Texas last week 59-10. They gave up a ton of plays through the air. I think Damon Williams is going to be able to do that. Now, probably not to that level. That being said, he probably doesn't have to do it to that level to still be able to win this game comfortably. Jonah Coleman's going to be an absolute nightmare for that Washington State defense. I think Denzel Boston's going to make play after play in this football game, and I think Washington wins this one pretty comfortably. Now, they do have Ohio State next week, so that's a little bit of maybe a look-ahead spot. I think there's enough juice still in this rivalry now, not too aggressive in a number of ways, but I think there's enough juice in the Apple Cup where these players will be ready to roll for Washington, and I think Damon Williams maybe just peeks his head into the Heisman conversation after this game with a massive, massive performance. Arizona State Baylor over 60.5. I'm a little bit worried about these defenses in a number of different ways. Arizona State lost way too many guys in coverage against Mississippi State, and Baylor, the pass game for SMU, did way too much against you in that first football game. So a lot of big-time questions for these teams. Obviously, Baylor really struggled to stop the run against Auburn as well. Sam Leavitt can do that. Not as many design quarterback runs, but you allow him to get out of the pocket, he's going to make you hurt. There's no doubt about that. I think this one goes a little bit back and forth. I think Jordan Tyson and Josh Cameron make all types of plays. I think they get at least over 61. I think there's big-time questions about both these football teams after this. Not to say they can't make a run in the Big 12, but at the end of the day, the loser's probably in pretty good trouble. You're moved to 2-2 on the season and be in a little bit of murky water going forward. But at the very least, I think we're going to have some fun watching this football game. I think Arizona State's going to find it offensively just a little bit more. I think Baylor and Sawyer Robertson continue to roll and play some good football, and both these teams are at least scoring points in this game. I think I'd lean Arizona State to win it, but not by much. I think it's going to be a really fun back and forth game that really goes down to the wire. Michigan State plus 17.5 over against USC. I'm a little bit worried about USC. They played good enough football last week. They only scored 26 points offensively. They did not necessarily put on a show at a place where you probably should put on a show. Not to say that Purdue's not a good football team or that they can't do interesting things this year, but at the end of the day, if you want to compete in the CFP and in the Big Ten, that's probably a team that you're going to want to be able to put away in the first half, and they just weren't able to do that. Michigan State's a better offense than they get credit for in a number of different ways. Nick Marsh is a very talented wide receiver on the outside. Aiden Childs is going to make plays. He's probably going to make some mistakes in this football game, but I think he's going to make enough plays to at least keep this thing close. I think they will force some mistakes to a USC team that loves to push the ball downfield. At the end of the day, you're going to walk into a Big Ten team that at the very least knows how to defend that a little bit better. I think Michigan State's able to do that. I think Aiden Childs makes a number of plays in this football game, and I think people leave it thinking USC was able to win it, kind of like last week. USC was able to win it, but how pretty did it actually look from that team that claims they want to make a CFP this year? So a lot of big-time questions around USC. I will take Michigan State to cover that 17.5 because I think Aiden Childs is downright special with the ball in his hand. So it's going to be a really fun weekend. I think there's 3 big-time games like there were last week now. Miami, South Florida didn't get a ton of love because I think a lot of people knew what was going to happen in that football game. It's exactly what happened. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a really, really fun weekend to get into. I think we got 3 games that are totally going to change up the CFP race. And then you got a Michigan-Nebraska game that could mean just as much as an Indiana-Illinois game. You have a Miami-Florida game that could lead to a firing, or Florida wins it and everything flips around in the moment and everything's rolling in Gainesville and they got a game against Texas in 2 weeks where maybe they get another big time win and they continue rolling on down the road. So a lot on the line this upcoming weekend. We could have a couple upsets. I will bet we'll have a couple upsets. I bet we'll have some incredible games, and I think at the end of it all, we'll have a better look at the CFP. Probably not a great one if I'm being totally honest, but I think we'll have a better look. We'll talk about a number of stuff on Friday. We'll get into some big-time superlatives for this upcoming weekend, give some final thoughts about these games. We'll get into all the big-time updates from this past week. Probably talk about Dabo Swinney's rant just a little bit more on Friday if I had to imagine. But at the end of the day, thank you guys so much for tuning into Just Another College Football Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It's meant the world to me seeing the numbers continue to go up, ever so slightly go up throughout the last couple of weeks. We will continue to bring it Monday, Wednesday, Friday throughout the college football season. We will have all the updates for you. we'll get into a lot of stuff on Friday, and we'll break it all down as we get into an incredible Week 4 slate. But thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It means the absolute world to me. But thank you once again for tuning in, and I will see you guys on Friday.